of Kittens and Broken Things, Chapter 52.
Garrus wanted to carry her out of there, swirl them in a stealth cloak and take her to the Madless. He had no idea how or even where to go from there. She'd been staying in the hospital. He had to get her out of here. He was trying not to panic, but these circumstances lent themselves to panic. He had a guilty and martyr-prone bondmate. He had to consider Sinar to be theoretically homicidal or suicidal. Garrus didn't think it would happen unless she specifically provoked it, but Sinar was capable of physical and even sexual assault, mental assault, could potentially kill her. She was thrashing like bleeding prey in shallow water. He really didn't think Sinar would do anything of the sort. Garrus thought Sinar would focus on his son's recovery, because there would be a recovery, thankfully. Hopefully. But this was her, and Garrus would not risk it. It was to protect all three of them, a grieving and passionate Sinar and a guilty and throat-bared Kara. No, absolutely not. He could not accurately predict either of them in this situation. Let's face it, in any situation. Except he knew that if the worst happened, he'd feel responsible for being the one who allowed it to happen, having known the potential and done nothing to prevent it. Even dismissing assault or death as possibilities or even probabilities, Garrus didn't want her emotionally vulnerable and in that room with him. Sinar would be capable of flaying her with a few sentences delivered too quietly for anybody else to hear. He might not be able to resist landing a crippling blow of opportunity, assassin training and inherent talent compelling him to seek and exploit weakness by his nature. Garrus couldn't afford to experience shock himself. He had to protect all three of them from making critical mistakes. He'd just made that man a specter, and he wasn't sorry he'd done it, but Sinar Tualan by any name or lighting was not to be underestimated in potential. Unfortunately, Garrus had learned well enough that he couldn't trust either of them to be exactly sane on the subject of the other. He'd seen her after Ashley's death. She was good at battle. She was good in the fray, and she was good at feeling what she needed to feel and sorting through it. But she needed time to feel, time to think. She needed Garrus's help and direction whether she wanted to or not. She needed him to intervene on the Normandy after Ashley, and she needed him now. He said quietly, "Kara, you need to sleep. You need to think. It's up to them now." Her eyes lit with sense briefly, encouraging him that sanity was a possibility. She heard him, particularly the "up to them."
Okay.
"We're going to the Madless, not an official visit, private entrance. You're going to shower and sleep, and I'm going to be with you." He didn't tell her she was going to eat, but she was going to eat.
Okay.
"I don't trust you right now, Kara, and that's not my fault, and that's not your fault. Shepard's job done, your main experience is Kara's guilt, and guilt is unpredictable. I don't want to keep you from grieving, but I do want to keep you from doing something destructive while you're under the influence of grief. It's like reverie. We're going to have to wait to make decisions together until later. For now, I'm grieving, but I'm not under as much influence. Let me make your choices for you. Our choices." She looked up at him, and he felt as though he had caught and held a fragile strand of agreement and trust. He'd said the right thing. Or she was a much better liar than he gave her credit. It didn't seem possible that the look on her face was the result of guile, but that's what guile did, didn't it? He repeated, "We'll get to the Madless together. Then you'll have time to think and feel in privacy with my help, and later we can decide what to do and what not to do." He saw pain and grief swirl in her eyes, reflections of chaotic thought as she held her small, pale hand and put it on his chest.
Okay. Let me just...
She concentrated for a moment. He watched the storm in her eyes, but this was an echo of Kara's fluid strategy and not just grief. She closed her eyes, breathing hard, her facial expression echoing the shocks of her thoughts. She seemed to come to some conclusions, all painful.
You're right. Thank you. I need you. Always have. always will. About telling the truth. You're right. You can't trust me, but I want to be trustworthy. I can warn you about where and why and what I might do. I want to make choices with you. I don't have any major confessions, and there's nothing wrong between us, but I want it to stay that way. I have to, you're right. I can't go in to see Senna alone. I don't think I can explain why. And that's the reason why I don't try sometimes. I don't have words, but I should find words for you. For us.
Her eyes surged with her leap of intended faith, deep stormy green as her hand moved from his chest to hold his again. She said with a thread of Kara steel wrapping her words tightly and slowly as she played them out like a reinforced lifeline.
I love you. I can't love you more. Thank you. You were absolutely right. You can't trust me on my own, but you can trust me to love you, to be Shepard, to make those choices. It may seem entirely out of the blue. Wait, that's a human metaphor. Palavan skies. Never mind. It may seem out of context. It's been bothering me, but not bothering me, and I don't know if you'll believe me or if it will bother you, but what it means to me doesn't matter as much as what it means to Senna. He asked me a question, and I should ask you. You should know. Do you believe in an afterlife?
Garrus was disoriented by the question. Her head was down and she seemed in thought trance, voice slow to counteract the wild spinning of emotion and possibility taking place in her eyes. She must have thought something could go wrong with the surgery, must have thought about her reaction to that. This wasn't entirely unexpected. She was retrieving those thoughts, those strategies. He hadn't really considered any afterlife since he was a child. He'd classified any afterlife as a myth along with flying verse and other fanciful ideas that faded next to holding a gun in his hands. Perhaps that was not poetic, but it was true. Turians didn't have a heaven like humans. The word spirits didn't apply to Turians after death. It applied to presences created by phenomena, avatars of the intangible like valor and sacrifice. He said cautiously, wondering if it was right or wrong, if his answer would invalidate the presence of her parents' voices. No, but if you want me to. She gave a soft, choked laugh and then kissed him. Once again he felt he'd gratifyingly given the right answer, the stroke of her mouth and the jet of reverie like needed heat through chilled flesh. She pulled back, her warm eyes with sanity and love, pinkies under his mandibles.
But if you want me to.
He didn't know what to say to that, so he watched her, waited for context, and partway not caring after seeing light and life in her eyes.
Senna had asked me not to believe in an afterlife so much as maybe granted a possibility, a tiny possibility. He knows I love you and knows I always will, and he realized the only way he could ever have me would be if you and I no longer existed as you and I. I'd have to die to not love you and stay dead. Forget everything.
Cold shock splashed through him with her description of Senar's bizarre spiritual flanking maneuver he hadn't anticipated, underlining how much he could not predict these two when left in a room alone together. Sanity and love asserted themselves in her face, and she rushed to reassure him.
This isn't as much about me as it is about him. He won't hurt me. I mean, you're right. I could make him hurt me because I can. I just can. If I wanted him to, and yeah, Maybe I feel like I deserve it. I can. But back to the afterlife thing. He asked me to grant that maybe Drell and humans had an afterlife and Turians didn't. That if you hadn't asked, he wouldn't be taking anything from you or me, nothing already pledged. I knew I didn't believe. I knew it. I know because I was dead. 2 years, Garrus. 2 years dead and nothing. No new life, no parents, no visions of you. And I was already in love with you when I died. But I don't remember anything about those 2 years. Nothing. He asked me to promise him the tiny, incalculable possibility that after I die, if humans had no afterlife and I had no hope of finding you, that we choose to reincarnate and find each other. It's a Drell myth. Manipar. Spirits that choose to reincarnate and seek each other rather than find the shores. It was after the Drell collector ship was rescued. He said he believed I might have a Drell soul, that Drell gods would grant me Drell choices, that after what I'd done to save Drell, no Drell god would deny me that right. I told him yes, because for me that possibility was zero. But he needed hope, wanted hope. He was dying, wanted to die, wanted to start over with me if he could. I didn't tell him the truth. I couldn't. It was a dying man's hope and wish. The truth is that if you'd asked me the same question, I would have told you I didn't believe, because you don't need that hope, and neither do I. We have now. We have every now. I'm lucky, and I have you. I don't believe in an afterlife, and I have experience on the subject. He knew enough to phrase it so all I acknowledged was a possibility. But with you, I have reality. I couldn't tell him no, and I should have, or I shouldn't have, I don't know. I couldn't crush his dying hope on the basis of it being impossible. Not with the look in his eyes. But I gave him false hope. He begged me to do it, made it impossible for me to say no, and he knows that. But do you understand? The only thing I can give the man is further trial and false hope. I feel guilty. I am guilty. He's deserving of love and devotion, and this is what I've given him. False hope and...
Garrus's jaw set, and his mandibles tapped her hands, images of knowing Russ was in love with him and being unable to do anything about it, but telling him that if things were different. He said, I understand. I do.
Yeah. Russ.
Not that he's asked me for an afterlife.
Because Taurians don't have them?
Yeah.
I don't think this human does either. Okay, there's some significant honesty about a virtually insignificant lie. I owe Senar so much, and we're past math. I can't add this up or sort this through, and there's only one thing I can do once the math isn't about me or him, and it's about us.
And what's that?
I can't see him. I can't be the one to tell him. I can't even visit him. It would be an ambush, something to reassure me that I've given him the opportunity to be furious at me for all the things I've done, or not done, that he wants, that he deserves, things I can't do. He needs his own time with his grief. I might owe him the opportunity to strike, but that's guilt. And you're right, he'd regret that. I can't give him the opportunity to strike. I feel guilty, but I don't feel guilty. He's going to live. It's selfish, and it's even cruel, and I arranged for that to be true. What I'm guilty about is not only false hope, which he knows, because of how he phrased asking for my promise, only that I remain open to certain circumstances being true. No responsibility for making those circumstances true. What I'm guilty about is I'm not sorry. I mean, I'm sorry for the loss of Yased's leg, of course, but I'm afraid Senar will look me in the eye and ask me if I'd do it again with the same outcome, or with Yased dead. And I don't know the truth there. I think I'd do it again. I need to know and own my answers. He needs time to get to the place where he would be able to see and hear that I'm not sorry, without wanting to kill me, without me wanting to let that happen. I'm not the sorry he'd like me to be. If I walk in there penitent, the wrong sort of penitent, he'll know it. I'll know it. And it would be tantamount to saying I would kill his son to save him, not just take a chance on it, but do it knowingly. I may never know the answer to that question clearly enough to satisfy what he wants to see. I saved Senar's life, but I've taken his purpose. I've replaced his hope of finding his wife at the shores with finding me in some cosmic game of spiritual hide-and-seek that I don't believe I will play. I've taken his son's lung and leg, and I'm unrepentant. He'll see it. He'll know it. I need to do for him what you're doing for me. Give time. Give distance. Give an opportunity to have a clear head.
Garrus half smiled. I don't think he's ever going to have a clear head about you.
Well, clearer? Before he went into surgery, he told me to attempt forgiveness. I'm going to honor that. If you say I'm being a martyr and I shouldn't throw my life at it, you're right. I can't tell you that he's going to like that or that it's going to work out well, but it will give him the time to decide who he's going to be. Someone in love with me, or no longer in love with me. Someone who owed me their life but doesn't any longer. Someone to whom I owe my life, and that won't change. That he knows I'm someone who convinced his son to give up a lung and a leg, potentially his life. That I'm someone who saved his son's life as a team with you. He deserves the dignity and time of patient choice and not forced confrontation. Garrus, I know I also owe to Senar in some ways the fact that I'm sitting here on your lap, able to be sane-ish. Too much overwhelming significance, and it would be poetic justice for him to take my hope, take my purpose, take my bond, take my life, because that's what I've done to him. I'll speak to Yased when he wakes. You and Karen decide what would be best for Senar. I'd suggest, I don't know, seems manipulative, but it would give Senar what he wants to know. The best chance at seeing Yased conscious and talking, not sedated. I'm still worried about brain damage, but I trust Karen, and I hope for the best. Keep Senar sedated until Yased is able to talk to him. Wake Yased first. Let him come to terms before speaking to his father. I don't know if that's medically unethical or if you can impress upon Karen that it's to prevent at least potential for homicide. Senar is capable of complete forgiveness and absolute wrath, and everything in between. Possibly all at the same time. He's capable of lying about it, just as I am, and I can't tell you what he's going to do. I do know he won't kill Karen, he won't kill Yased. He might try forgiveness. I wouldn't trust him if he said so, though, and he'd see that also. He deserves the chance to choose to be believed, to own his truth without me deciding or provoking it. I have to be as merciless about ending this as I was about beginning it. It's not about grief or my responsibility. It's about what the two of them want to do about it, and how they wish to hold me responsible or forgive me. My absence from his decision process will be the equivalent of pain relief after surgery. Let the injuries have a chance to potentially heal before he expresses how he feels about them. I will attempt forgiveness. I'll await their judgment. I'll accept what they decide together. Senar will respect and understand that. He won't like it. But he won't like anything I do, or have done, mostly. And that makes me sad. I'd like for him to be happy, but I can't see how he can find his way there with me in the middle of his path.
Kara, what you've done, what he's asked, you didn't make him do that. He knew what he was doing. He's entirely aware of his own crafted temptations and traps, and he's not an innocent bystander you forced into service. He'll want to talk to you. You know this won't go somewhere that he gives up. Would you look him in the eye and take back the promise to be his Manipar? She breathed in and closed her eyes, pain and realization.
No, I can't. Even knowing the chance is 0, there was and is a reason to grant him hope. I see no reason to take it, considering its value to me, and he knew that before he asked. Again, he's not worthy of trust, but trusting him is the only way to get to where I want. Some sort of peace, not all-out war. I can't afford to be at war with Senar Tualan. I don't want to be at war with him. Ever.
All right. It matters to him. He'll be angry, but I promise that this won't turn out with Yased and Senar leaving for a dry retirement colony. And now you won't tell Senar no to anything reasonable he asks for. And he's going to want to be back on the Normandy. You know that. I know that. He knows that. It might take some time, but he's not going to give up his potential eternity with you because you're in love with me. I also don't think he's going to kill either of us, but he wouldn't be sorry if I were suddenly gone and he wasn't the cause. You're vulnerable to him, Kara. Not in the way he wants, but he's patient. His answer to everything is going to be, not yet. He's waiting until that moment. Once Yased is entirely healed, his thoughts will turn back to his ideal inevitable, you. She didn't argue with him at all, those words passing through her without a conflicting ripple.
I'll always be willing to talk to him. He just needs to ask for me, or find me. He's a specter now, it won't be hard. I won't hide. I just won't make myself a target for unleashed grief. I'm going to let them decide. It depends upon Yased, mostly. It's about him. I can make it about him, and not about me. If Senar or Yased wish to make it about me, then I'll give them the time they need to come to that conclusion without me muddying already churned waters. He asked me to not witness the surgery to greet your family. I refused. I insisted upon hovering.
Garrus smiled. He asks for the strangest things.
He asks me to do what I don't want to do, a lot.
Yeah, he can't seem to help twisting your arm where he can. I'd say I don't understand, but that would make me a hypocrite. Not like I'm going to stop sending him a standing order for a basket of fruit and tea. Now I'm going to double it and add one for Yased. You don't want to meet my family?
I'm terrified of meeting your family.
But now you'll do it for him?
Yeah. And for us, I can at least do some good. I'll wear the green and the gold, as he advised. Will an official meeting be broadcast?
Probably, yes. It'll at least make Cypertine local social news.
Good. Then he'll see it, and he'll know I took his advice, and I'm taking his advice.
So you're going to be a dutiful, forgiving martyr in his name.
A dutiful, merciless strategist lying in stylized wait. Just like him. You've proven it isn't about me. It's about you. It's about Yesed. It's about Sennar. It's about your family.
It's about us.
Yes. And you love me, and I love you. I want to love Sennar, but I've succeeded in generating false hope and maiming emotional and spiritual. Now, physical. I love Yesed, but I need to be able to expect and accept rejection. I want to love your family, but I find myself lacking in Turian ideals at the moment. Most moments.
Didn't listen past you loving me and me loving you, he teased.
So you don't have to ask why I'm doing what I'm doing. For us. And the definition of us, with just you and me, stays the same. Every other us, I'll do my best for them, but I can't count on being loved by them.
You are and will be loved by all of them, Kara. She smiled, but some of the grief and hurt came back into her eyes, the storm of strategy failing, so she re-experienced the river of pain. She was at least more stable, more solidly herself.
Garrus, I love you so much. I'm terrified of destroying your legacy, of ruining Sennar's future, and Yased's promise of a life, breaking spirits, disappointing parents.
Garrus gave himself more fully to her begun and broken kisses, weaving together threads of reverie, threads of them, that focused sense of the two of them being all that mattered. Kara, love, I'm afraid that you being merciless to Sennar Tualan will gain more of his respect, and he'll fall for you harder. Presenting yourself as green and gold Shepard will dazzle my family. I fully support your mercilessness. We all owe you our lives and our livelihoods, and if other people don't appreciate it, that means more time for me being the main beneficiary. It occurred to him again that she could be lying, and he really did not care at all, admiring the grace and curves of her mind and strategy, mercilessness and vulnerability. She and Sennar were very much alike, and he couldn't blame Sennar for doing his best, turning her head to the imaginary to gaze, twisting her arm as far as it would go, only to find that she did not have the sort of imagination, and her arm twisted voluntarily, and only so far. But they all knew venom could replace imagination. This was a real risk. But she was right, and declaring war was unwise on so many levels. Garrus had his own math, and he couldn't make it add up either, except that 1 + 1 = mine, and if Sennar sought the same math, he'd be a hypocrite to blame him. The man had excellent taste, and would not give up. Sennar deserved the opportunity to make his own choices. With Kara's perspective, it seemed less likely that Sennar would hurt her. Given time, he would be patient and determined, now potentially more so, with a lean toward commensurate ruthlessness. But Garrus doubted his methods would alter. Garrus would prefer to eliminate all risk to Kara, but he couldn't bring himself to do it in any way. Once again, he had to wait and see. Sennar would decide if he was going to be a benefit or a liability, and he was capable of lying about or delivering both. They couldn't trust his words, but the man had proven through his actions that he'd earned a spectership and respect from both Kara and Garrus. From everyone. Kara would not banish Sennar as she might, as she should. She still needed him as an asset, was willing to excuse him as a liability. She was willing at this moment to walk in, physical and emotional throat bared, green eyes with her bizarre defiance and the equivalent of, "Kill me, do it," as a dare. The Madalus had a lot of security cameras. She wasn't going anywhere. He didn't even need to ask Russ to act as sentry. She was going to be anchored at her Turian bondmate's side, arm consensually twisted, and he would zealously protect her from the imaginary and the real, the potential and the illusory. He believed her reasoning, didn't think this was a feint where she would slip his voluntary arm lock on her in order to throw her life at an impassioned, grieving Drell for the drama of it. Minimizing drama suited Garrus just fine. He didn't care about the afterlife, understood the hope, understood why she hadn't told Garrus about Manipar before but told him now. He believed her about that it didn't matter, and she felt guilty because it was false hope, but hope Sinar wanted. He understood the power of hope. He'd been driven by it since meeting her. Someone like Sinar needed her brand of hope and inspiration if he were to ever be a better man in any way, if he were ever to be a man who deserved her, even in another life. He murmured, "If there's an afterlife, I'll find you first, just like I did this time. I'm not worried. I'm damned well going to take advantage of every now I have with you."
I was never worried about that. Thank you for twisting my arm.
She was determined to comfort and reassure him, and he was going to take it. He didn't ask if it was thanks for the press conference that took away her choices about their bond and her enforced solitude, for him restraining her against grief, for the fact that her arms were his and he could twist them any way he wanted, or any other reason. Any and all didn't matter. She was still worried about everything else and not wanting to appear that way. His arms tightened around her. Reverie, love, and admiration had him heading hazily down the path of about to mercilessly claim his bondmate in the surgical gallery. She was going to have enough trouble walking. He shouldn't make it harder on her. He really, really wanted to make it harder on her. Instead he stood, lower to the ground, and allowed the kiss to end. The melting, chaotic green of her eyes, something he wanted to lose himself in as soon as possible. She didn't want Sinar, or she did in imaginary and theoretical places, but she would never make that real as long as Garrus placed himself firmly in her path, which he would do at every opportunity. All that remained for Sinar was what was left when she died, which she believed to be zero, and Garrus believed meant she was his and would be in any life, any afterlife, definitely this life. She didn't want the status and wealth of the Vicarian family or the power of the counselorship unless she was Shepard. She'd meet them clothed in symbolism and all her Kara reasons for things. She did want Garrus, and had for a long time. She loved him. The entirely inappropriate surge of lust and love, aided by reverie, made it hard for him to ease breathing in plates, but he opened his eyes and saw the remnants scattering the operating room, green blood and significance. He slid his hands through her hair and then down her back, pressing her against him while mourning the loss of the kiss. He would have us later. He would have us always, and he was blessed. He didn't need to claim anything imaginary. He had her, everything real about her. Wordlessly, he held her until she could steadily step away, which she did as soon as she was able. When she was steady on her feet and he held her face between his wide palms, pale skin contrasting with his hide, the sense of enveloping her welcome. "We're going home, our home, together. We're going to face everything together. I believe you, Kara. Yes, you're a merciless, untrustworthy liar who loves me and has proven that for years. Sinar loves you and wants you, and that's true, and that can stay true. You can love him and even want him, and you can both share as many dreams or possibilities as two merciless liars can concoct between themselves. I'm real. We're real. That's all that matters. They are both going to live. Harm has come to you, said, but not unforgivable harm. The reality here, Kara, is that you saved Sinar's life. Most people would appreciate that. But he's a contrary bastard, and that's okay. I'll thank you for saving his life. You said, well, thank you. It might take a while. Sinar never will, but he should. Your influence on his life has not been a bad thing, Kara. He wants you to be indebted so he can collect. I won't let that happen, and you won't let that happen. Stay merciless. You saved his life. You gave the son back to the father, and now you've given the father back to the son for a longer time frame. A sane person would know that's worth a lung and a leg. I know it. They can take your chance or ruin that chance, but if they blame you, then that is not your fault. That is their grief and failure to understand. You didn't want him to lose a leg. You didn't cause him to lose a leg. You did everything. I did everything to extend their chances for a good outcome. Yesed is in the best place he can be for a prosthetic and therapy. He'll have family and be cared for, if he wants it, for his lifetime. You and I have given him a home, a future, a family, a father. You've given Sinar a conscience. It's painful and he hates it, and that's a shame, and that sucks for him. But Kara, you are a good thing. Sinar wants you, covets you, will manipulate you into believing you owe him, will continue to give until you feel the weight of that debt, and I know you feel it. But he's doing it on purpose, Kara. Remember that. You didn't cause it or provoke it. You didn't want that or make that happen any more than you wanted Yesed to lose his leg. You tried to prevent it. He's choosing to do it. He will choose to do it again. I can't blame him, and if he had any path to seduction, he'd likely take that, but he doesn't. He can only count on your guilt to deliver your vulnerability. Don't be guilty. Come home with me. Stay with me. Meet our family. Do not let Sinar Tualan turn a gift into a debt. Sinar and Yesed are going to sleep for 2 days and start to heal, and you are going to stay with your bondmate, who knows you're a gift. Practice not being a martyr. The Madless is not a debt, Kara. It's a gift. Family. It's really a miracle. Don't miss it. Her smile was radiant.
You know something? You're very smart, Garrus Fanning.
It's all the lust. Keeps me on my game.
Me too. Please, take me home. Please, stay with me. Please.
I should warn you that the Madless has lots of security cameras.
Oh, good. Then you won't be sneaking out on me.
I love you so much. You scare the hell out of me, but I love you so much.
I think you like being scared.
Then I'm in luck. I chose well.
And I was chosen well.
That whole thing about not feeling guilty about Sinar incurring debt doesn't apply to me. You can feel indebted to me all the time. I'd like that.
I do.
Oh, good. Then you won't be surprised that a lot of the next 2 days will be spent barely able to think.
Sounds like heaven.
Meet you there.